Part 1. Special opening for daily Dharma listening, awakening in the quiet before dawn. Before the sun rises, before the first sound of the day touches the drifting air, there is a sacred stillness that has carried through centuries. It is the same stillness that ancient practitioners trusted as the doorway to insight, the same quiet that the early disciples of the Buddha listened to with reverence. And here, within this gentle silence, the journey of daily Dharma listening begins. This is not merely a channel but a small sanctuary where those who seek calm, wisdom, and the art of living with a peaceful heart may gather. As you let your breath settle, you allow the world around you to soften, and in this softening, a space opens within, wide, calm, steady, inviting the ancient teachings to rise like the first light over a sleeping valley. In this very first part of our 30-part journey, we step into the foundational understanding of how Buddhist teachings remain alive in modern life. Though centuries old, they speak directly to questions we quietly carry: how to stay calm and positive when everything accelerates beyond our control, how to find peace in chaos when the noise of the world grows unbearable, how to live without fear in an age of constant uncertainty, and how to protect your energy when the boundaries of the self feel fragile. To begin this exploration, we return to a simple truth that the Buddha repeated again and again: all transformation begins in the mind. When we transform our mind, we transform our world. This is not poetry but a profoundly practical instruction, a reminder that the mind is the soil from which every thought, emotion, and action grows. Imagine sitting beneath a Bodhi tree, not the one in ancient India, but the symbolic tree of your own present life. Its branches are the stories you tell yourself, the beliefs you carry from childhood, the fears you've picked up along the way. Some branches are strong and life-giving, others are worn, brittle, ready to fall away. The work of Buddhism for beginners, and indeed for all practitioners, is gently learning which branches you nourish and which you release. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that the mind, if left unattended, grows wild like a forest without sunlight. Thoughts tangle, anxieties root deeply, and emotional storms move in without warning. But just as a skilled gardener enters a tangled grove not with fear but with patience, you too can learn to step into the forest of your mind with curiosity instead of avoidance. There is an ancient story told among early practitioners about a wanderer who came to the Buddha troubled by a mind full of storms. He said, "I cannot find peace. My thoughts race. My heart trembles. The world feels heavy. Tell me how to escape." The Buddha did not offer escape, he offered clarity. He said, "When the storms come, do not run. Sit. Watch. Let them reveal what they are made of." The wanderer resisted, believing that relief could only come through avoidance. But slowly, over many days, he learned that by sitting still and observing his suffering without judgment, something remarkable began to unfold. The storms lost their power. They were no longer monsters but movements of mind, temporary, passing, insubstantial. This ancient lesson becomes a modern lifeline, especially for those facing stress, anxiety, and the quiet panic of feeling lost. Buddhist lessons for anxiety invite us to watch the mind rather than drown in it. When you observe a thought without believing it, the thought weakens. When you observe fear without feeding it, the fear dissolves. But how does one practice this in today's world, where distractions scatter attention and pressures bind us like ropes? One small, powerful practice is to pause in the midst of chaos. Each time you feel overwhelmed, take one mindful breath. Feel the air move in. Feel it leave. A single breath is enough to remind you that you are not the chaos, you are the awareness that sees it. This remembering is how you protect your energy. The more you practice this small pause, the more natural it becomes to meet difficulty not with reactivity but with presence. Modern life also tests us with constant comparison, endless productivity demands, and the fear of falling behind. Yet ancient Buddhist teachings point us to a different rhythm, one that honors the slow unfolding of inner growth. When you feel lost, Buddhist reminders call you back to the present moment, encouraging you to befriend your own steps rather than comparing them to those of others. Imagine a traveler walking a mountain path. Some stretches are steep, others gentle. Some are dark beneath thick forests, others open to sunlight. If the traveler becomes obsessed with the distance ahead or the footsteps behind, he forgets to notice the path directly beneath him, where his life actually is. In the same way, you are invited to return to your own path, one breath, one choice, one moment at a time. There is also wisdom in understanding the nature of suffering. Buddhism does not tell us to deny our pain, it teaches us to understand it. When pain is understood deeply, compassion grows. When compassion grows, the heart becomes light. To live without fear is not to live without pain, but to live with courage in the presence of pain. This courage is gentle. It does not roar, it whispers, reminding you that you already contain the strength you need to meet each moment. As you listen to these reflections, notice how your inner landscape shifts. Perhaps there is a softening around the edges of your thoughts, or a quiet sense of recognition, as if your mind remembers a wisdom it once knew. That is because these teachings are not foreign, they are part of the human experience itself. Every person carries the seeds of peace, clarity, and resilience. Buddhist wisdom simply helps you water them. And as we begin this long series together, let this first part be an invitation to slow down, to breathe, to reconnect with the quieter truths of your own life. If you find meaning here, allow your heart to guide you further. Subscribe to Daily Dharma Listening so that each teaching, each reflection, each calming story can find its way to you in the moments when you need it most. Like and share this journey with those who may be silently searching for the same peace you seek. Together, may we learn to find peace in chaos, transform the mind, and walk the path with steadiness and compassion. This is the beginning. Let us step forward gently. Part 2. The quiet art of returning to yourself when the world pulls you away. There comes a moment in every seeker's path when the world feels unbearably loud, when the pace of life rises like a tide threatening to swallow the stillness within. You may feel pulled in many directions at once, urged by responsibilities, expectations, fears, and desires that never seem to rest. In these moments, the ancient teachings of Buddhism whisper a gentle reminder: return. Return not to a place, nor to a belief, but to yourself, to the quiet awareness that has always been present beneath your thoughts, beneath your emotions, beneath the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what your life is supposed to be. It is here, in this quiet returning, that the heart begins to settle and the mind begins to soften. Buddhist teachings often speak of the mind as a sky, vast, open, limitless. The clouds that pass through, whether bright or stormy, symbolize thoughts, emotions, and experiences. Yet no matter how heavy the clouds become, the sky is never harmed. It remains untouched, spacious, unchanged. When you forget this truth, you begin to mistake the clouds for the sky. You begin to believe that every thought defines you, every emotion tracks you, every worry shapes your destiny. But when you remember that you are the sky, not the clouds, a quiet strength awakens within you. This remembering is the essence of Buddhist wisdom, and it becomes the foundation for understanding how to stay calm and positive even in the midst of turbulence. There was once a monk who traveled through a village known for its harsh winters and even harsher tempers. The people were often quick to anger, quick to argue, and quick to assume the worst. Intrigued by their suffering, the monk stayed for several weeks, observing the rhythm of daily life. He noticed that the villagers were deeply reactive. Every small inconvenience ignited frustration, every unpleasant word created conflict, and every passing sadness was amplified into despair. When the villagers finally asked him why they suffered so much, the monk offered a simple answer: because you believe every emotion that arises within you. You cling to each moment's cloud as though it will never pass. The villagers protested, insisting that their emotions felt as real and immovable as mountains. But the monk smiled softly and said, "Mountains only look immovable. Even they change. Why do you think your thoughts are stronger than mountains?" This story carries the heart of many Buddhist lessons for anxiety. It invites you to notice, not judge, not suppress, not escape, but simply notice the movements of your mind. When fear arises, observe it. When sadness arrives, hold space for it. When anger flares, acknowledge it without letting it define your next action. This practice does not eliminate suffering instantly. Rather, it dissolves the unnecessary suffering that comes from resisting what is already here. You learn to find peace in chaos by releasing the belief that chaos controls you. You discover how to live without fear by understanding the nature of fear itself, that it is not an enemy, but a visitor. It arrives. It stays. And eventually, it leaves. Modern life does not make this easy. The constant stimulation of screens, notifications, comparisons, and expectations creates an environment where the mind rarely rests. But this is precisely why returning to yourself becomes a sacred necessity. In a world that endlessly pushes you outward, spiritual practice pulls you inward. It teaches you to protect your energy in a society that demands more than your spirit can give. It helps you see through illusions of inadequacy, rushing, and competition by reminding you of an ancient truth: your worth is not measured by how much you do, how quickly you move, or how loudly you speak. Your worth arises simply from your being, from the silent awareness that witnesses every breath. To integrate Buddhist wisdom into daily life, consider the subtle moments that often go unnoticed. When you wake in the morning, there is a brief pause, perhaps only a second, before your mind begins to assemble the day's concerns. In that pause lies a doorway to clarity. If you allow yourself to be fully present for even that single second, the rest of your day shifts. You begin your morning not with urgency, but with awareness. This is how Buddhism for beginners invites you to practice, not by adding complexity to your life, but by illuminating the sacredness already present in ordinary moments. Throughout history, teachers have emphasized the power of small awakenings. You do not need dramatic revelations or mystical visions. What truly transforms your mind is the accumulation of small, gentle returns to presence. When you wash your hands, feel the temperature of the water. When you sip tea, notice the fragrance rising with the steam. When you walk, feel the ground beneath your feet. These are not trivial practices, they are the beginning of deep remembrance. Each mindful moment strengthens your connection to the self you lose when worry consumes you. Each breath taken with awareness helps you recognize that calmness is not something you must chase, it is something already inside you. There is another teaching often overlooked: the importance of compassion toward oneself. Many people treat their suffering with harshness, believing that they must push through, ignore, or overcome their emotions with force. But Buddhist teachings remind us that compassion is not weakness, it is strength. When you speak gently to yourself, you soften the inner critic that feeds anxiety. When you forgive your own mistakes, you release the weight that keeps your heart heavy. When you hold your pain tenderly, you learn to live without fear, not because fear disappears, but because you no longer face it alone. You become both the wounded and the healer, the seeker and the guide. Consider a simple example. Imagine you are overwhelmed by a difficult day, your thoughts tangled, your heart heavy. Instead of telling yourself to get over it or pretending to be unaffected, try placing a hand on your chest. Feel the warmth beneath your palm. This small gesture, practiced by monks for centuries, activates a deep memory within the body, a memory of safety, care, and kindness. With each breath, feel the tension loosen, the mind grow quieter, the heart soften. This is not escapism. It is presence. It is the gentle art of returning to yourself. When you practice returning again and again, a subtle transformation begins. You start noticing the stories your mind creates, stories of failure, stories of unworthiness, stories of fear. And when you see them as stories rather than absolute truths, you reclaim your power. This is the beginning of freedom. Buddhist reminders when you feel lost serve as a compass, guiding you back to your inner home. They remind you that even when the path seems unclear, your next step is always found in the present moment, not in imagined futures or remembered failures. In the end, the quiet art of returning to yourself is not about perfection. It is about recognition. Recognition of your own depth, your own capacity for peace, your own inner wisdom. It is about noticing that beneath every cloud lies the open sky, vast, calm, untouched. And so, part 2 closes with a soft invitation. When the world pulls you away, return. Return without urgency. Return without judgment. Return gently, as though you are coming home after a long journey. Your mind will meet you there. Your heart will welcome you. And your path will continue to unfold. Part 3. The middle path within the noise, finding balance in a world that swings between extremes. There is a timeless whisper within Buddhist teachings that speaks of a path not too tight and not too loose, a way of living that rests gently between excess and deprivation. It is called the middle path, and though it was first taught more than 2,500 years ago, its relevance has only grown in a world like ours, where everything seems to pull you toward extremes. One moment, you are urged to do more, be more, achieve more, prove more. The next moment, you feel the crushing weight of exhaustion, disconnection, and the creeping sense of not being enough. In this swinging back and forth, life becomes unsteady. The mind becomes confused. The heart becomes tired. And so the middle path becomes not merely a teaching, but a lifeline, a steady hand guiding you through the storms of modern existence. To understand this path deeply, imagine yourself standing in a busy modern city at dusk. Cars rush past in both directions, screens glow from every corner, people move quickly with determined expressions, and the air is filled with an invisible tension, the tension of people striving for a moment of peace that always seems one step away. In the midst of this sensation, you pause for a breath. And in that single breath, a truth becomes clear. The world around you may be loud, but the world within you does not have to echo the same noise. Balance begins not in external circumstances but within the quiet awareness that sees everything without being swallowed by it. This is where Buddhist wisdom takes root, offering you a way to stay calm and positive, not by changing the outside world, but by changing the way your inner world meets it. The Buddha discovered the middle path after experiencing both extremes, deep indulgence in worldly pleasures and harsh discipline through severe asceticism. Neither brought him peace. Neither offered clarity. Only when he embraced balance did awakening become possible. This ancient realization can be applied to ordinary life today. Think of the times you have pushed yourself to burnout, believing that success must come from relentless effort. Think of the times you have retreated completely, avoiding challenges because fear felt too heavy to carry. Both extremes create suffering. Both keep you trapped in cycles of anxiety and frustration. The middle path, however, invites you to walk gently between these extremes, to live with mindful intention rather than emotional reactivity. There is a story of a young musician who sought the Buddha's guidance. He asked, "How do I find the right way to live?" The Buddha responded with a simple metaphor, "How do you tune your instrument?" The musician replied, "Not too tight, or the string will break. Not too loose, or the string will not play." The Buddha smiled, saying, "Just so with the mind. When held with balance, it creates harmony." This lesson, though ancient, becomes profoundly practical when applied to daily frustrations. When work becomes overwhelming, the middle path reminds you to rest. When emotions become intense, it encourages you to breathe. When fear whispers that you must control everything, it invites you to soften your grip. Balance does not mean avoiding responsibility. It means approaching life with steadiness instead of tension. In modern life, extremes appear everywhere: the pressure to succeed, the fear of failing, the craving for approval, the dread of rejection. Social media amplifies these extremes, feeding the mind with endless comparisons that erode the sense of self. Yet Buddhist lessons for anxiety teach you to recognize the impermanent nature of these pressures. Nothing you feel remains forever. No emotion, no fear, no desire has the power to imprison you unless you cling to it. The middle path helps you loosen that grip. It teaches you to observe your reactions without letting them define you. When your thoughts pull you toward panic, you return to the breath. When frustration pushes you toward anger, you return to awareness. When sadness draws you toward hopelessness, you return to compassion. These returns are not escapes but realignments, guiding you back to the center where clarity lives. Imagine again that busy city. You walk slowly as others rush. You breathe deeply as others tense. You listen inwardly as others seek distraction. In this simple difference, you find the middle path, not by withdrawing from the world, but by walking through it with a calm and open mind. This is how you protect your energy in environments that drain you. This is how you live without fear in spaces that demand constant vigilance. Even a single mindful breath becomes an anchor, a point of balance in a chaotic flow. There is another dimension to the middle path, one that often goes unspoken: compassion. Balance is not merely a mental act, it is a heart practice. When you see people caught in extremes, reacting harshly, speaking unkindly, living fearfully, you begin to understand that they are suffering. Just like you, they want peace. Just like you, they want happiness. Just like you, they long for ease in their minds. Compassion grows when you see beyond the surface of people's behavior. You begin to soften toward their struggles, recognizing the shared humanity beneath the noise. This softening reduces anger, dissolves resentment, and nurtures patience. Compassion toward yourself is equally essential. When you fall into extremes, do not scold yourself. When you react strongly, do not judge. When you lose balance, do not despair. Instead, return to the middle path gently, as though guiding a friend who has wandered off for a moment. This self-gentleness transforms your mind gradually, allowing awareness to replace reactivity and kindness to replace self-criticism. Buddhist reminders when you feel lost emphasize this tenderness. They encourage you to take one small step at a time, trusting that each step taken in awareness leads you closer to peace. To illustrate this, imagine standing at the edge of a lake. The water is clear and still, but when you throw a stone into it, ripples spread across the surface. The ripples represent your reactions, thoughts, emotions, impulses. If you continue throwing stones one after another, the water becomes turbulent. But if you allow the ripples to settle, the lake returns to clarity on its own. The middle path is this allowing. It is the decision to stop throwing stones of judgment, fear, and impatience into the lake of your mind. With time, clarity returns. With clarity, you see life as it truly is, free from the distortions of extremes. Even your relationships are transformed by this balance. When someone speaks harshly, instead of responding with equal harshness, the middle path helps you pause and see the suffering behind their words. When a loved one withdraws, you find the patience to give space without fear of abandonment. When misunderstandings arise, you respond not with defensiveness but with curiosity. This gentle steadiness makes connections deeper, healthier, and more resilient. It allows love to grow without the weight of expectation or fear. The middle path also teaches you the art of enough, not too much, not too little. Enough effort to honor your responsibilities. Enough rest to nurture your well-being. Enough silence to hear your inner voice. Enough courage to face discomfort. Enough humility to let go. When you live with this sense of enoughness, life becomes spacious. The heart feels lighter. The mind no longer runs in circles searching for what it already holds. And so, as this part concludes, let the middle path settle into your awareness. Let it be the quiet thread that weaves through your days, guiding you gently between extremes. When the world pulls you in many directions, return to center. When stress overwhelms you, breathe into balance. When fear rises, soften into awareness. And when you feel lost, remember that the way back is always through the middle, steady, calm, compassionate, awake. Walk quietly. Walk gently. Walk in balance. The path will unfold beneath your feet. Part 4. The stillness beneath every storm, resting in awareness when life becomes overwhelming. There are moments in life when everything feels too heavy to carry. The mind becomes crowded with thoughts that move like restless winds, and the heart grows tired from holding emotions that seem too vast to contain. Modern life is full of storms, unexpected disruptions, subtle anxieties, silent fears, invisible pressures. Yet Buddhist teachings remind us of a profound truth. No matter how violent the storm becomes, there is a stillness beneath it, an unshakable awareness that remains untouched. This stillness is not something you must create, it is something you return to, something you uncover beneath the layers of fear, expectation, and thought. In this part, we explore that stillness, not as an idea, but as a living refuge available within each breath. To understand this stillness, imagine standing on a mountaintop while thunderclouds gather overhead. The wind pushes against your body, the trees bend, and the sky darkens. Yet beneath your feet, the mountain is unmoving. Solid. Steady. Vast. The storm may roar around you, but it cannot shake the mountain. In the same way, your awareness, the pure knowing behind your thoughts, is the mountain beneath every storm of emotion and circumstance. When you anchor yourself in this awareness, you learn how to stay calm and positive even when the world seems to collapse around you. This is not denial, it is recognition. Recognition that storms are temporary, but awareness is enduring. There is a well-known story in Buddhist tradition about a monk who meditated near a waterfall. The sound was deafening, so loud that no one else could meditate there, but the monk remained still, his mind undisturbed. When asked how he managed such tranquility, he smiled and replied, "The waterfall is loud, but the river beneath it is silent." This teaching becomes a guiding metaphor for the inner life. Thoughts, fears, and worries are like the roar of the waterfall, unpredictable, overwhelming, constant. But beneath these surface movements lies a deeper river, the quiet stream of awareness that watches everything without being disturbed. When you rest in that river, your suffering loosens its grip. This is why Buddhist lessons for anxiety emphasize observation rather than avoidance. Instead of trying to silence your thoughts through force or distraction, you learn to watch them with curiosity. You see how each thought arises, lingers, and fades. You notice the patterns your mind repeats, fears of what might happen, regrets of what already did, concerns about how others see you. When you observe these patterns with gentle awareness, something extraordinary happens. The mind begins to settle on its own. It becomes clearer, quieter, more spacious. Anxiety is no longer a consuming fire, it becomes a passing breeze. The stillness beneath the storm reveals itself not through control, but through acceptance. One day, a young woman came to a teacher seeking relief from her overwhelming stress. She worked tirelessly, trying to prove her worth in a world that demanded constant achievement. She feared slowing down because she believed everything would collapse if she weren't constantly pushing. After listening to her for a long while, the teacher placed a clear glass of water in front of her and stirred it vigorously until the water became cloudy. "This," he said, "is your mind when you constantly stir your life with worry." Then he set the glass down. Slowly, the particles settled. The water cleared. "And this," he continued, "is your mind when you learn to stop stirring." The woman understood. The stillness she sought could never appear so long as she continued to agitate her mind. It would arise naturally when she allowed things to settle. This teaching, though simple, becomes deeply practical for anyone living in a world filled with noise. To find peace in chaos, you do not need perfect conditions. You need only to stop stirring, to stop feeding the storm with constant mental resistance. A single moment of mindfulness acts like the stilling of the glass. When you pause, breathe, and allow your experience to be exactly as it is, clarity returns. This clarity does not eliminate your responsibilities or challenges, but it changes the way you hold them. You begin to act from wisdom rather than panic, from presence rather than pressure. In today's world, many people feel lost because they confuse their thoughts with their identity. They believe that fearful thoughts mean they are weak, that sad thoughts mean they are broken, that angry thoughts mean they are unkind. But Buddhist wisdom teaches a liberating truth: thoughts are just thoughts. They do not define you. They are weather patterns moving through the sky of the mind. You remain the sky. When you understand this deeply, you learn to live without fear, not because fear disappears, but because you understand its nature. You realize that fear, too, is just a cloud passing through. This understanding helps you protect your energy. Instead of reacting to every thought or emotion that arises, you choose which movements of mind deserve your attention. You stop giving energy to stories of inadequacy, to imagined scenarios that never unfold, to the relentless inner critic that keeps you small. You begin to nourish thoughts that bring clarity, compassion, and steadiness. This is how you transform your mind, not by suppressing negativity, but by cultivating awareness so deep that negativity loses its power. To illustrate this transformation, imagine holding a small flame in your hands. The flame represents your awareness. When the wind blows fiercely, the flame flickers. It may wobble, shrink, or bend, but it does not go out. As you learn to steady your hands, the flame burns more clearly, illuminating everything around you. In the same way, your awareness becomes stronger each time you choose presence over panic, stillness over struggle, acceptance over resistance. With practice, even the strongest winds, fear, grief, uncertainty, cannot extinguish the flame within you. There is another profound yet gentle teaching woven throughout Buddhist reminders when you feel lost. Suffering is not a mistake. It is a teacher. It reveals the places where you cling too tightly, where you fear too deeply, where you forget your true nature. When suffering arises, awareness invites you to look directly into it, not with judgment, but with compassion. You begin to ask, what is this suffering trying to show me about myself? This question does not push pain away, it transforms pain into insight. Gradually, you discover that every storm carries a message, every discomfort points to a deeper truth, and every moment of suffering becomes an opportunity for awakening. Consider a practical example. Someone speaks harshly to you at work. Instantly, emotions flare, hurt, defensiveness, anger. The storm begins. But if you pause for just one breath, if you rest in awareness for even a moment, something shifts. You see not only your own reaction but also the suffering in the person who spoke to you. Perhaps they are overwhelmed, afraid, or lost in their own storms. This recognition softens your heart. Instead of reacting with equal harshness, you meet the situation with balance and compassion. This does not mean allowing others to mistreat you. It means responding from wisdom rather than impulsive emotion. This is how the stillness beneath the storm transforms relationships, dissolving unnecessary conflict and deepening understanding. Stillness is not passivity. It is clarity in motion. It allows you to act with precision, to choose your words carefully, to move through the world with grace. When your mind is settled, you make wiser decisions. You say yes only when it aligns with your values. You say no only when it protects your well-being. You walk through life not hurried, not distracted, but deeply grounded. This grounding brings a profound sense of dignity to your existence, a quiet confidence that arises not from control, but from inner freedom. In the end, resting in awareness is the essence of Buddhist practice. It is the home you return to, the refuge that welcomes you without condition. Life will continue to bring storms, moments of loss, moments of uncertainty, moments of deep emotion. But awareness will remain steady beneath it all, like the mountain beneath the thunder, like the river beneath the waterfall, like the flame that continues to glow despite the wind. So let this part close with a gentle reminder: you are not the storm. You are the stillness beneath it. Whenever life becomes overwhelming, return to this truth. Rest in awareness. Let the storms come and go. Let thoughts rise and fall. Let emotions move through you like passing clouds. And know that beneath it all, you remain vast, calm, and unshakably awake. Part 5. The gentle courage to let go, releasing what no longer serves your path. There is a quiet truth woven through the heart of Buddhist teachings. Much of our suffering does not come from what happens to us, but from what we refuse to release. We hold tightly to old memories, to expectations that never unfolded, to imagined futures that keep us restless, to fears that whisper lies, to identities we outgrew long ago. We cling to relationships that have drained our spirit, to beliefs that have limited our growth, to emotions that have overstayed their purpose. And yet, letting go feels frightening, as though releasing these burdens means losing a part of ourselves. But ancient wisdom reminds us that letting go is not an act of abandonment, it is an act of liberation. When you let go, you make space for clarity. You make space for peace. You make space for the life that is waiting to unfold. In the early days of his teaching, the Buddha spoke often about the nature of grasping. He taught that clinging is like holding a rope too tightly. The harder you pull, the more painful it becomes. But if you loosen your grip, the rope no longer cuts into your skin. This metaphor applies beautifully to the mind. When you cling to thoughts, desires, or outcomes, you create tension. You stir the waters of the mind until they become murky. But when you release the need to control, something remarkable happens. The mind begins to clear, like a lake returning to stillness after a stone has settled at the bottom. Letting go is not passive, it is profoundly active, a deliberate choice to place your trust not in fear, but in awareness. There is a story about a monk traveling with a group of villagers across a river. The monk carried one of the villagers on his back to help her cross the water. Hours later, as they continued their walk through the forest, another monk said, "Why did you carry that woman across the river? It goes against the rules of our path." The first monk smiled gently and replied, "I left her by the river hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" The story reveals a deep lesson about the burdens we carry long after the moment has passed. We relive conversations, replay mistakes, revisit fears, rehearse arguments, and reconstruct scenarios that no longer exist. These mental habits trap us in cycles of suffering. Letting go is the freeing act of setting down what the mind keeps picking up. Modern life offers endless opportunities for clinging. Social expectations tell you who you should be, what you should achieve, how you should look, how you should feel. You cling to perfectionism because you fear judgment. You cling to overworking because you fear inadequacy. You cling to relationships because you fear loneliness. You cling to control because you fear uncertainty. These fears bind the heart, and the binding makes life heavy. Buddhist lessons for anxiety teach you to see the nature of this clinging clearly, not to condemn yourself for it, but to recognize it with compassion. When you understand that clinging is rooted in fear, you begin to soften. You begin to let go gently, not with force, but with awareness. Imagine holding a handful of sand tightly. The more you squeeze, the more sand slips through your fingers. But if you relax your hand, the sand rests easily in your palm. Life works the same way. When you try to force things to stay as they are, you lose your balance. But when you allow life to unfold naturally, without tightening your grasp, you discover ease. You begin to understand how to stay calm and positive even when the world changes beyond your control. You begin to see that letting go does not mean giving up, it means choosing not to suffer unnecessarily. Letting go also means releasing identities you no longer need. Perhaps you have spent years believing that you must please everyone to be worthy of love. Perhaps you have carried guilt for mistakes you made long ago. Perhaps you have believed that you are not strong enough, not capable enough, not deserving enough. These beliefs weigh heavily on the heart. They prevent you from seeing your inherent potential. Buddhist wisdom teaches that you are not the stories you tell yourself. You are not the labels placed upon you by others. You are awareness itself, vast, spacious, luminous. When you let go of the stories, you return to this deeper truth. Letting go is also an act of protecting your energy. When you stop carrying the past on your shoulders, when you stop feeding thoughts that drain your spirit, when you stop forcing yourself into shapes that do not reflect who you truly are, you reclaim your strength. You reclaim your clarity. You reclaim your peace. In this way, letting go becomes an act of courage, a gentle, steady courage that arises from wisdom rather than force. It is a courage born from trust in your own capacity to transform your mind, to meet the present moment with openness rather than fear. Consider a moment from everyday life. Someone criticizes you unexpectedly. The mind reacts instantly, tightening, defending, replaying every word. But if you pause and observe the reaction, you may notice something interesting. The hurt does not come from the words themselves, it comes from the meaning you attach to them. When you cling to the belief that others must approve of you, criticism becomes painful. But when you let go of that belief, the words lose their power. They become just sounds passing through the air. Letting go in this way does not make you indifferent, it makes you free. Another example, imagine you set a goal you felt certain you needed to achieve to feel successful or complete. But as life unfolds, the goal becomes heavy, burdensome, misaligned with your deeper values. Letting go of that goal may feel like failure. But in truth, it is alignment. It is waking up to the realization that you do not need to chase what no longer resonates with your spirit. This is how you find peace in chaos, by choosing alignment over attachment, awareness over ambition, wisdom over ego. Letting go also applies to emotions. Every feeling has a life cycle. It arises, peaks, and fades. But when you cling to an emotion, either resisting it or feeding it, you interrupt its natural flow. You prolong your suffering. Instead, Buddhist reminders when you feel lost encourage you to let emotions move through you like waves. When sadness comes, let it wash through. When anger arises, let it surge and soften. When anxiety appears, let it visit and leave. The awareness beneath the emotion remains untouched. This awareness is your refuge, your ground, your unshakable center. In the practice of letting go, forgiveness becomes essential. Forgiving others does not excuse harmful behavior, it frees your heart from carrying resentment. Forgiving yourself does not erase your mistakes, it allows healing to unfold. When you forgive, the heart opens. Space returns. Compassion deepens. Forgiveness is the doorway through which letting go becomes possible. Without forgiveness, the past remains alive, shaping your present. With forgiveness, the past dissolves, and you return to yourself. The courage to let go also reveals itself in simplicity. Modern life encourages accumulation of possessions, achievements, titles, experiences. But the more you accumulate, the more you must protect, maintain, and worry over. Simplicity lightens this load. It teaches you to value presence over possessions, depth over abundance, intention over urgency. When you embrace simplicity, you create room for stillness. You create room for clarity. You create room for peace. In the end, letting go is an act of deep trust. Trust that life will carry you where you need to go. Trust that you have the wisdom to navigate uncertainty. Trust that your suffering can transform into insight. Letting go is the soft release of everything that weighs down your spirit. It is the gentle unfolding of your deepest truth. Before this part ends, let this teaching settle into your heart. You are allowed to release what no longer serves you. You are allowed to choose peace over turmoil. You are allowed to walk away from what drains your spirit. You are allowed to begin again. If this journey brings you calm, clarity, or strength, consider subscribing to Daily Dharma Listening so these teachings continue to flow into your days. Like and share if it feels meaningful. May you find the gentle courage to let go, and in that letting go, may you rediscover the vast open space of your own awakened heart. Part 6. The mind as a wandering traveler, guiding your thoughts back home with compassion. There are days when the mind behaves like a restless traveler, wandering endlessly from place to place, unable to settle, unable to rest. You may be sitting in a quiet room, yet your thoughts roam far beyond the walls, toward memories that still sting, toward fears of what has not yet occurred, toward conversations that replay in loops, toward desires that keep tugging at your heart like distant winds. This wandering is not a flaw but a natural movement of the human mind. And yet, if left unguided, this traveler becomes lost, confused, exhausted by pathways that lead nowhere. Buddhist teachings remind us not to punish the wandering mind but to understand it, to meet it with tenderness, to guide it gently back home to the present moment. To begin understanding this wandering nature, imagine a young traveler walking through a vast landscape. At first, the journey feels exciting. Every direction holds a new possibility. Every horizon feels inviting. But as the traveler walks without purpose or destination, fatigue sets in. The landscape becomes overwhelming. The traveler's steps become heavy. And eventually, the desire to return home grows stronger than the desire to explore. The mind is just like this traveler. It seeks stimulation, novelty, movement. But beneath this seeking lies a deeper desire, to return to the sanctuary of presence, to the refuge of awareness where peace naturally arises. This is why Buddhist wisdom encourages mindfulness not as a rigid discipline but as a gentle returning. When you notice your mind wandering, you simply guide it back, the way you would lead a tired traveler towards shelter. You do not criticize. You do not demand. You do not scold. You simply return. This act of returning again and again is the heart of how to stay calm and positive in a world that constantly pulls you outward. Just as the traveler learns the way home by walking the same path repeatedly, the mind learns peace through repeated returns to the present moment. There is a story told in the ancient monasteries about a student who complained to his teacher, saying, "My mind is too wild. It jumps everywhere. I cannot meditate. I cannot find peace." The teacher responded by handing the student a cup full of water and asked him to walk a slow circle around the hole without spilling a single drop. The student focused intensely, walking carefully. When he returned, the teacher asked, "What did you notice during your walk?" The student replied, "I noticed nothing except the water." The teacher smiled and said, "If you give your mind something gentle and steady to rest on, it will not wander." The student understood. The practice was not to force the mind into stillness but to offer it a place to settle. In modern life, however, the mind rarely finds such places. The world is designed to pull your attention in countless directions. Notifications flash, voices call, responsibilities accumulate, and the pressure to constantly achieve leaves little space for presence. This is why awareness must be cultivated intentionally. Mindfulness becomes your anchor, your home, your grounding point when the traveler within begins to drift. Whether you are washing dishes, sitting in traffic, or standing in line, you can always return to your breath, to your body, to your awareness. These moments of return may feel small, but they accumulate like drops of water filling a bowl. Over time, they transform your mind. When you guide your thoughts back home, you also learn to protect your energy. The wandering mind expends enormous mental and emotional fuel. It pulls you into dramas that never happened, scenarios that never unfolded, fears that never came true. It drains you with unnecessary suffering. But when you guide the mind with compassion, you reclaim this energy. You become more grounded, more clear, more aligned with the present. You learn to live without fear, not because fear disappears, but because your awareness no longer chases every fearful thought that arises. The observer within you grows stronger than the storm. This inner observer, your awareness, remains untouched by the movements of mind. Thoughts may be chaotic, but awareness is calm. Emotions may surge, but awareness is steady. Worries may intensify, but awareness is unmoving. Awareness is the home your wandering traveler seeks. It is spacious, warm, and peaceful. When you rest in awareness, you offer your mind a place to breathe. Consider a common experience. You lie in bed at night, trying to sleep, and suddenly the mind begins to wander relentlessly. It replays conversations, repeats worries about the next day, imagines negative outcomes, and before you know it, the mind becomes a whirlwind. In such moments, awareness invites you to return gently. You feel the rise and fall of your breath. You feel the weight of your body on the mattress. You notice the sounds around you. These simple observations act like lanterns guiding your traveler home through the dark. Slowly, the wandering quiets. The mind settles. Peace returns. There is another layer to this teaching, one that often goes unnoticed: compassion. Many people believe that discipline is harsh, that training the mind requires force. But Buddhist teachings emphasize compassion as the most powerful form of discipline. When you guide the mind gently, it responds with softness. It learns to trust you. The wandering decreases not through suppression but through understanding. The mind wanders because it seeks relief, stimulation, escape, comfort. Instead of judging these movements, compassion asks, what is the mind seeking? What pain is it avoiding? What fear is it hiding? What longing does it carry? When you listen to these questions, you develop a deeper intimacy with your own mind. This intimacy becomes the foundation of wisdom. Imagine sitting beside a young child who cannot sit still. If you scold the child, their restlessness increases. But if you hold their hand, speak gently, and guide them with kindness, they begin to settle. Your mind is the same. If you fight it, it rebels. If you shame it, it resists. But if you guide it with love, it softens. It returns home willingly. One of the most profound Buddhist reminders when you feel lost is that awareness is always available. No matter how far your mind wanders, you can always return. You do not need to be calm to practice. You do not need to be free of anxiety. You do not need to be perfect. You only need to notice. The act of noticing is itself the return. This simple truth dissolves the pressure many people feel when beginning their spiritual journey. You do not need to become someone else to practice Buddhism. You only need to be present for yourself. Another powerful teaching arises from this understanding: the present moment is enough. You do not need to go anywhere else. You do not need to become anything else. The wandering mind often believes that peace lies elsewhere, in a different job, a different relationship, a different version of yourself. But Buddhist wisdom teaches that peace is found only here, in this moment. When the mind wanders into the future or the past, it wanders away from the only place peace exists. The act of returning teaches you this truth again and again. To embody this teaching in daily life, imagine each thought as a traveler entering a doorway. Some thoughts carry fear, some carry joy, some carry doubt, some carry memories. You do not need to follow every traveler. You simply greet them, acknowledge their presence, and let them pass through. When you stop clinging to each thought, you stop traveling endlessly with the mind. You remain rooted in awareness, the home beneath all experience. And so, the wandering mind becomes not an enemy but a teacher. Its restlessness reveals your attachments. Its fears reveal your wounds. Its desires reveal your longings. And each time you guide it home, it strengthens your awareness, deepens your compassion, and expands your wisdom. As this point draws to a close, let the image of the wandering traveler stay with you. Your mind may wander 1,000 times, but awareness welcomes it back every single time with the same gentle embrace. And with each return, your inner home becomes brighter, steadier, and more peaceful. Part 7. The wisdom of impermanence, embracing change as the path to inner freedom. There is a truth so simple, yet so difficult for the human heart to accept: everything changes. The seasons shift, relationships evolve, the body ages, circumstances rise and fall, emotions swell and dissolve, thoughts appear and vanish. Nothing in this life remains fixed, not your joys, not your fears, not even the self you believe yourself to be. This truth, known as impermanence, lies at the heart of Buddhist teachings. And though it may seem unsettling at first, impermanence is not a source of despair. It is the source of freedom. When you understand impermanence deeply, you stop clinging to what cannot be held. You stop fearing what cannot be avoided. You begin, slowly and gently, to find peace in chaos, steadiness in uncertainty, and spaciousness in the midst of change. To begin exploring this wisdom, imagine a single leaf floating down a river. It rides the current effortlessly, turning and drifting as the water moves. At times, the river is calm and clear. At other times, it becomes turbulent. The leaf does not resist. It does not cling to the branch it came from nor attempt to control the water beneath it. It simply moves with the flow of life. The human mind, however, does the opposite. It clings to familiar branches, memories, identities, expectations, routines, and resists the current of change. This resistance creates suffering. When you want life to stay the same, yet life continues to change, you experience friction, fear, and grief. But when you learn to flow like the leaf, present, responsive, open, you discover a deep well of tranquility. There is a story of a great king who sought a message that would keep him steady in both joy and sorrow. After consulting many wise sages, he received a simple inscription, "This too shall pass." At first, he found it comforting, then confusing, and finally, profoundly true. When he experienced victory, he remembered, "This too shall pass," and he did not become proud. When he faced heartbreak, he remembered, "This too shall pass," and he did not become hopeless. When moments of confusion, fear, or uncertainty arose, this gentle truth brought him back to balance. Impermanence became his anchor, a reminder that life unfolds in waves and that resisting these waves only deepens suffering. In modern life, change is constant. Technology evolves faster than our minds can adapt. Relationships shift as people grow in different directions. Careers rise and fall. Opportunities appear and vanish. And within all these movements, anxiety often takes root, whispering, "What if everything falls apart? What if I lose what I love? What if the future is uncertain?" Buddhist lessons for anxiety teach us that fear is not the enemy, clinging is. When you cling to the belief that things should remain stable, predictable, and permanent, you create suffering. But when you accept that everything is in motion, you begin to live without fear, not because life becomes easy, but because you stop fighting its natural flow. Impermanence also reveals a tender truth about emotional life. No emotion lasts forever. When sadness arises, it feels overwhelming, as though it will never end. When anger arises, it burns so intensely that it distorts your view of reality. When joy appears, you may try to grasp it, fearing that it will vanish. But just as clouds move across the sky, emotions move through the mind. They arise, they peak, they fade. When you observe this process, you learn not to identify with your emotions. You understand that feeling lost does not mean being lost. You learn to protect your energy by allowing emotions to move freely rather than holding on to them. This is the essence of transformation, to let each experience pass through you without becoming trapped in it. Consider a moment from your own life, perhaps a time when you experienced deep grief or heartbreak. At the time, it felt impossible to imagine a day when the pain would soften. Yet here you are, breathing, living, moving forward. The pain changed. Your relationship to it changed. This is impermanence. Or consider a moment of joy that felt almost too beautiful to bear, a tender moment with someone you loved, an accomplishment you worked hard for, a quiet evening filled with laughter. That moment, too, changed. Its beauty came from its impermanence. Nothing about your life has ever truly stayed the same, and yet you have continued, grown, evolved. Impermanence is not meant to make you detached or indifferent. It is meant to open your heart. When you understand that every moment is fleeting, you begin to appreciate life more deeply. You savor the warmth of sunlight on your skin. You listen closely to the voice of someone you love. You give fully, express clearly, and show up wholeheartedly, knowing that each moment is unique and cannot be repeated. Impermanence teaches you gratitude, not as a forced practice, but as a natural response to the preciousness of life. There is another teaching woven into impermanence: non-attachment. Many people misunderstand this as emotional coldness or disconnection. But non-attachment does not mean you stop loving. It means you stop clinging. It means you love with openness rather than possessiveness. It means you allow people to grow, change, and evolve without trying to force them into a fixed image. It means you release the need to control outcomes. This kind of love is spacious. It protects your energy. It transforms your mind. It opens pathways to compassion rather than fear. Imagine holding a butterfly in your hands. If you close your fist tightly, you harm the butterfly. If you open your palm gently, the butterfly may stay for a while, resting peacefully. And when it chooses to fly, it does so freely. This is non-attachment, not a rejection of beauty, but a respect for its freedom. When you apply this to relationships, to experiences, to aspirations, you learn to live without fear of loss. You trust that whatever is meant to stay will stay, and whatever must change will change. This trust brings a deep sense of peace. The practice of embracing impermanence also helps you navigate uncertainty. In times of transition, changing jobs, moving homes, losing someone, beginning anew, the mind often becomes frantic, searching for stability. Buddhist reminders when you feel lost encourage you to return to the breath, to the present moment, to the awareness that watches everything unfold. The present moment is always stable because it is always real. The future is imagined. The past is remembered. The present is lived. When you anchor yourself in presence, uncertainty loses its power. Even the self is impermanent. The person you were years ago is not the person you are now. Your beliefs have changed, your values have evolved, your understanding has deepened. This realization frees you from the pressure to remain the same. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to outgrow old versions of yourself. When you embrace this, you step into a life that is more aligned, more authentic, and more peaceful. Impermanence also transforms how you approach suffering. Instead of seeing pain as something to escape, you see it as something that will pass. Instead of believing difficult moments define you, you recognize their temporary nature. This insight does not erase suffering, but it dissolves the fear that suffering will last forever. And without fear, suffering becomes bearable. It becomes a teacher. To live with the wisdom of impermanence is to live with openness. You stop forcing life to meet your expectations. You stop fighting what is leaving. You stop gripping tightly to what is arriving. You learn to flow, breathe, and trust that life unfolds exactly as it must. You learn to see the beauty in endings, the potential in beginnings, and the peace available in every moment between. As this part comes to a gentle close, let the truth of impermanence rest softly in your heart. Everything changes. Everything passes. And within this constant movement, you are invited to awaken, to see clearly, to live fully, to love deeply, to let go gracefully. When you embrace impermanence, you unlock the door to inner freedom. Part 8. The subtle art of inner listening, hearing the truth beneath thought, emotion, and desire. There is a silence within you that has existed since the moment you were born, a vast, spacious quiet that sits beneath every thought, every feeling, every longing. It is the silence that remains when you are not thinking about who you should be, what you must achieve, or how you are perceived. It is the silence that watches the rise and fall of sensation, the movement of breath, the shifting of circumstance. And it is within this silence that the deepest wisdom of the human heart is found. Buddhist teachings invite you to cultivate a profound skill that many people overlook entirely, the art of inner listening. Not listening to the chatter of the mind, not listening to the cravings of desire, not listening to the loud narratives shaped by fear, but listening to the subtle voice of truth that lives beneath everything else. To begin exploring this inner listening, imagine standing at the edge of a still lake in the early morning. The water reflects the mountains clearly, the sky effortlessly, the trees with perfect precision. But if the lake is disturbed by waves, by wind, or by stones thrown carelessly, the reflection becomes distorted. Your mind works much the same way. When it is filled with noise, restless thoughts, heavy emotions, swirling anxieties, the truth becomes difficult to see. But when the mind becomes still, when you observe without reacting, without judging, without clinging, clarity emerges. This clarity is not something you must invent, it appears naturally when the noise settles. This is why Buddhist wisdom teaches that insight does not come from thinking harder, it comes from listening deeper. Inner listening begins with awareness of your thoughts, not as truths but as movements. Most people allow their thoughts to dictate their actions, their self-worth, their emotions. They believe a fearful thought means danger is near. They believe a self-critical thought means the criticism is true. They believe a desire means it must be fulfilled. But Buddhist lessons for anxiety reveal that thoughts are not commands, they are ripples in the mind. When you listen closely, not to the content of the thought but to the nature of the thought, you begin to see its impermanence. Thoughts arise, linger for a moment, and fade. They are not you. They do not define you. They are passing patterns, like a breeze across your skin. Inner listening also reveals the truth behind emotions. Many people fear emotions, especially intense ones, anger, sorrow, anxiety, longing. They suppress them, distract themselves from them, or act impulsively because of them. But when you listen closely, emotions become messages rather than threats. Anger often reveals a boundary that has been crossed. Sorrow may reveal something you loved deeply. Anxiety may reveal an unmet need for safety or clarity. Longing may reveal a part of yourself that is asking for expression. When you listen with compassion rather than resistance, you learn what the heart is trying to say. You learn how to protect your energy not by avoiding emotion but by understanding it. There is a story of a young disciple who asked a master, "How can I hear the truth?" The master took him to a river and said, "Listen." At first, the disciple heard only the loud rush of the water. The master said again, "Listen deeper." The disciple closed his eyes and began to hear more. The soft splash of small stones shifting beneath the current, the whisper of wind through the reeds, the faint echo of birds in the distance. Now, the master said gently, "You are beginning to hear." The story teaches that truth does not shout. Truth whispers. It speaks quietly beneath the noise. To hear it, you must become still. In the modern world, inner listening is becoming a rare skill. Everything is designed to drown out the quiet voice within: constant notifications, endless news, relentless comparison, the pressure to perform, the desire to succeed. People rarely sit with themselves long enough to hear their inner wisdom. They seek answers outside, through opinions, validations, and distractions. But Buddhist reminders when you feel lost guide you inward, where all real answers reside. When you are unsure which direction to take, sit in stillness. When you feel overwhelmed by emotion, listen beneath the emotion. When your mind becomes scattered, listen beneath the thoughts. Awareness will show you the way. Inner listening also helps you discern between craving and clarity. Craving is loud, urgent, demanding. It says, "I need this now." Clarity is quiet, steady, patient. It says, "This is right for you." Many people mistake craving for intuition because they never learn to listen deeply enough to tell the difference. But Buddhist wisdom teaches a simple method. Craving feels tight, pressured, and restless. Clarity feels spacious, calm, and grounded. When you listen to your inner world with awareness, you learn to feel this distinction. You learn to transform your mind by following the voice of clarity instead of the pull of desire. Consider a moment from your own life when you made a choice that felt wrong, even if it seemed logical. Perhaps you felt a tightening in your chest, a heaviness in your stomach, a quiet whisper inside saying, "This is not for you." Yet you moved forward because the world told you to, because fear told you to, because desire told you to. That subtle whisper was your inner voice. It does not force. It does not shout. It simply reveals. And it reveals the truth. When you ignore it, suffering follows. When you honor it, peace follows. Inner listening is not limited to thoughts and emotions, it extends to your physical body. The body is a wise teacher, constantly communicating your state of mind. When you feel anxious, your breath becomes shallow. When you feel angry, your jaw tightens. When you feel overwhelmed, your shoulders rise. When you feel peaceful, your body softens. Awareness of these signals allows you to respond with wisdom. Instead of reacting blindly, you pause and listen. You breathe. You soften. You return to yourself. There is a moment in meditation when the mind becomes quiet enough for insight to appear. It may feel like a soft light flickering, or a gentle warmth spreading through the chest, or a clear knowing arising without effort. This is not imagination, it is the natural intelligence of awareness revealing itself. When you cultivate the art of inner listening, these moments become more frequent. You discover how to stay calm and positive not by forcing happiness, but by listening to what the moment needs. Sometimes it needs stillness. Sometimes it needs courage. Sometimes it needs compassion. Sometimes it needs release. Inner listening guides you naturally toward what nourishes your spirit. When you listen deeply, you also learn the truth of interconnectedness. You begin to sense the subtle energy of others, their stress, their fear, their tenderness, their longing. You develop empathy not through effort, but through presence. When someone speaks to you, you listen not only to their words but to the emotion behind their words, to the silence between their sentences. This makes relationships deeper, more genuine, more compassionate. You respond with kindness rather than assumption, with clarity rather than reaction. Inner listening becomes a mirror. It shows you the truth of who you are, not the labels given by society, not the roles you play, not the beliefs you inherited, but the awareness that exists beneath it all. When you sit in silence long enough, you begin to feel the presence of this awareness. It is spacious, luminous, peaceful. It is untouched by your past and unconcerned with your future. It is the essence of what you are. Buddhist teachings describe this as your true nature, a nature that is inherently awake. As you develop the subtle art of inner listening, you begin to live differently. You no longer rush. You no longer force. You no longer cling. Every action arises from presence. Every decision comes from clarity. Every step is taken with awareness. This does not mean life becomes simple or easy, but it becomes honest. It becomes aligned. It becomes peaceful. And so, let this part close with a gentle invitation: listen. Not to the noise of the world, not to the fear of the mind, not to the pull of desire, but to the quiet truth beneath it all. Listen deeply. Listen patiently. Listen with compassion. Everything you seek, peace, clarity, direction, freedom, lives within the subtle art of inner listening. Part 9. The roots of suffering, understanding the mind's illusions and the path back to clarity. Suffering does not come from the world outside. It arises from the interpretations, attachments, and illusions that form within the mind. This truth sits at the core of Buddhist teachings, yet it often feels hidden behind the countless layers of story, memory, identity, expectation, and fear that shaped your lived experience. To understand suffering is not to dwell in darkness, it is to illuminate the pathways that lead you out of it. This illumination does not require supernatural insight or dramatic transformation. It requires only presence, quiet, honest presence, and the willingness to look gently into the movements of the mind. To begin understanding the roots of suffering, imagine yourself entering a dimly lit room where shadows dance along the walls. At first glance, the shadows appear frightening: strange shapes, distorted silhouettes, shifting forms. Your heart tightens, your breath shortens, fear wraps around you like a cold mist. But when you light a candle, the shadows dissolve instantly. They were never monsters. They were shapes misunderstood in darkness. This is how the mind works. Thoughts, worries, and emotions become frightening when left unexamined. But when lit by awareness, they lose their power. The shadows of the mind, fear, doubt, insecurity, longing, transform into clarity. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from three primary roots: ignorance, craving, and aversion. These are not moral failings, they are patterns of mind that develop over time. Ignorance is the inability to see things as they truly are. Craving is the desire for things to be other than they are. Aversion is the refusal to accept what arises. These roots intertwine like vines around the heart, tightening with each reaction, each anxious thought, each moment of reactivity. When you forget your true nature, when you forget awareness, the mind becomes entangled. Ignorance appears in many forms. It is the belief that you are your thoughts. It is the belief that your emotions define you. It is the belief that life must meet your expectations to bring peace. It is the belief that lasting satisfaction can be found in things that are impermanent. It is the belief that suffering is a punishment rather than a teacher. Each of these beliefs clouds the mind like fog, obscuring the truth that peace is not found outside but within. Craving arises when the mind grasps for more approval, more success, more pleasure, more certainty, more control. It whispers, "I will be happy when," and ties your well-being to future conditions. But as Buddhist wisdom reveals, craving is endless. When one desire is fulfilled, another appears. The mind becomes restless, always chasing, never arriving. This is why Buddhist lessons for anxiety often focus on calming the grasping mind, teaching it to rest even when it does not receive what it wants. Aversion is the flip side of craving, the pushing away of what the mind dislikes. It is resistance to discomfort, fear of pain, rejection of truth. Aversion narrows your world, tightening your chest, closing your heart. It says, "I will be at peace only when this goes away." Yet the more you push discomfort away, the more it grows. This resistance becomes a storm that rages not because the situation is unbearable, but because the mind refuses to accept what is already present. To see the roots of suffering clearly, imagine the mind as a garden. Some plants grow naturally, peace, compassion, clarity. But weeds also sprout, fear, craving, anger, confusion. If you ignore the weeds, they spread and overtake the garden. If you try to destroy them by force, you tear up the soil. But if you kneel down and observe them, if you see how they grow and what nourishment they feed on, you begin to understand them. And understanding is the beginning of transformation. Buddhist reminders when you feel lost encourage this kind of gentle examination. When you feel overwhelmed, sit with your experience rather than running from it. When you feel anxious, observe the thoughts that arise instead of believing them. When you feel sadness, allow it to move through you without resistance. When you feel anger, breathe into the fire rather than feeding it. This is the path of awareness, the path back to clarity. There is a story of a master who asked his student to bring him a handful of salt. The student did so, and the master placed the salt in a glass of water, stirring it gently. "Drink," the master said. The student sipped and grimaced. "Bitter," he said. Then the master led him to a lake. He poured the same handful of salt into the lake and asked the student to drink. The student bent down, cupped the water, and tasted it. "Fresh," he said. "Does the lake taste bitter?" the master asked. "No," the student replied. "The salt is the same," the master said, "but your container is too small." This is the nature of suffering. The events of life may be bitter, but your suffering depends on the size of your awareness. When awareness is small, every difficulty feels overwhelming. When awareness expands, suffering dissolves into spaciousness. This is why the teachings encourage you to expand your awareness, to grow the lake rather than shrink the salt. When you expand your awareness, you stop identifying so tightly with your fears, your opinions, your judgments, your desires. You see them as passing phenomena, not permanent truths. This expansion is how you learn to stay calm and positive in the midst of difficulty. It is how you find peace in chaos, not by eliminating chaos, but by expanding the space within you that can hold it. Understanding the roots of suffering also teaches you how to protect your energy. Many people exhaust themselves by constantly fighting their inner world, rejecting their emotions, battling their thoughts, trying to control everything around them. But protecting your energy does not mean shutting down or avoiding life. It means meeting life with awareness. It means responding rather than reacting. It means recognizing what nourishes your spirit and what drains it. It means choosing presence over panic, acceptance over resistance, clarity over confusion. One powerful way to understand suffering is to watch your own reactions. When someone criticizes you, observe what happens in your mind. Do you feel a tightening in your chest? Do you replay their words? Do you begin defending yourself internally? These reactions reveal your attachments, perhaps to approval, to identity, to being seen a certain way. When you observe this, you do not need to judge yourself. You simply see. And seeing clearly loosens the grip of suffering. Another example, when life changes unexpectedly, when a relationship ends, a job shifts, a plan dissolves, the mind often cries out in fear. This fear reveals your attachment to stability and control. But when you breathe into it, when you listen deeply, you realize that fear is a natural response to change. And change, as impermanence teaches, is the nature of existence. When you accept this, suffering softens. As you continue to practice looking into the roots of your suffering, a profound shift begins to unfold. You start seeing suffering not as a punishment, not as a flaw, not as something to hide, but as a guide, a teacher pointing you toward the places within that need understanding. Suffering becomes the doorway to awakening. It becomes the mirror showing you where your heart is ready to open. The illusion of the separate self, the idea that you are isolated, alone, disconnected, is perhaps the deepest source of suffering. But as awareness deepens, you see that you are not separate. You are connected to every breath of wind, every drop of rain, every being that shares this earth. When you experience this connection, compassion arises naturally. Compassion dissolves suffering, not through force, but through understanding. As this part comes to a close, let the teachings rest quietly in your heart. Suffering has roots, and because it has roots, it can be understood. And because it can be understood, it can be transformed. You do not need to fight your suffering. You only need to understand it. Awareness is the light that dissolves the shadows of the mind. When you walk this path gently, patiently, honestly, you return to clarity, your natural state. Part 10. The quiet strength of compassion, softening the heart without losing yourself. Compassion is often misunderstood as weakness, an emotional softness that leaves one vulnerable to hurt or manipulation. But Buddhist teachings reveal a very different truth. Compassion is a profound strength, a quiet power that rises from deep understanding rather than emotional fragility. It is the natural expression of a mind that sees clearly and a heart that remains open even in the presence of suffering. Compassion does not ask you to sacrifice yourself, to endure mistreatment, or to lose your boundaries. Instead, it teaches you how to stay calm and positive while meeting the world with wisdom, grace, and the capacity to understand the suffering hidden beneath the surface of every harsh word, every tense silence, every unexpected reaction. To begin understanding the quiet strength of compassion, imagine a vast tree standing on a hillside. Its roots travel deep into the earth, anchoring it in storms. Its branches stretch outward, offering shade to wanderers, shelter to birds, stillness to those who rest beneath it. The tree does not choose who may sit in its shade. It does not adjust its branches to suit preferences. It simply stands in its own grounded nature, offering without depletion, giving without losing itself. Compassion in Buddhism is like that tree. It is rooted in inner stability, not in pleasing others. It is grounded in clarity, not in emotional confusion. It nourishes others, but it never abandons itself. But why is compassion so central to Buddhist wisdom? Because suffering is universal. Every person you meet, whether joyful or difficult, confident or afraid, kind or unkind, is carrying something unseen. Pain that has not been spoken. Fears that have not been healed. Wounds that have not been acknowledged. When you begin to see this clearly, compassion arises naturally. Not because you are forcing yourself to be forgiving or gentle, but because you recognize your shared humanity. Compassion becomes the natural expression of wisdom, the fruit of awareness, the softness of a heart that understands impermanence and the interconnectedness of all beings. There is a well-known story in Buddhist tradition about a man who approached the Buddha, shouting insults and accusations. The Buddha remained calm, listening without reacting. When the man finished, the Buddha asked him, if someone offers you a gift and you refuse to accept it, to whom does the gift belong? The man replied, it remains with the one who offered it. The Buddha smiled gently, then I refuse your gift. This story is not about staying silent in the face of harm, it is about understanding the nature of emotional exchange. Compassion does not mean taking in someone's anger or carrying their suffering as your own. It means meeting their pain with clarity, refusing to mirror their confusion, and protecting your energy without closing your heart. In modern life, compassion is often tested by conflict, misunderstanding, and emotional exhaustion. You may encounter people who are difficult, demanding, or distant. You may face situations that challenge your patience, your resilience, or your sense of peace. But Buddhist reminders when you feel lost encourage you to pause, breathe, and look deeper. When someone speaks harshly, compassion asks, what pain are they speaking from? When someone withdraws, compassion wonders, what fear is keeping them silent? When someone disappoints you, compassion reflects, what struggle might they be carrying? This does not excuse harmful actions, but it helps you respond from wisdom rather than reaction. Compassion also teaches you how to live without fear. When your heart is open, you no longer fear vulnerability, because you know vulnerability is not weakness but truth. When your mind is grounded, you no longer fear emotions, because you understand their impermanent nature. When your awareness is steady, you no longer fear suffering, because you know suffering is a path to understanding. Compassion dissolves fear not by creating comfort, but by creating clarity. When you understand deeply, you fear less. When you fear less, you love more. Consider a situation where you feel hurt. The mind instantly builds walls, defensiveness, anger, withdrawal. But if you pause and look inward, you may notice that beneath the hurt lies something softer, a longing to be understood, a hope to be seen, a desire for connection. When you recognize this in yourself, you begin to recognize it in others. Then compassion becomes natural, not forced. It flows not from obligation or moral duty, but from awakening. Compassion also applies inward. Many people treat themselves with harshness, criticizing every mistake, punishing every imperfection, rejecting every flaw. But Buddhist lessons for anxiety remind you that your mind is not an enemy. Your fear is not an enemy. Your past is not an enemy. These are parts of you asking to be understood, not rejected. Inward compassion teaches you to speak to yourself gently, to hold your own suffering with care, to comfort the wounded parts of yourself with the same tenderness you would offer to a friend. Imagine placing a hand over your heart when you feel overwhelmed. Feel the warmth beneath your palm. Feel the rise and fall of your breath. This simple act is a powerful expression of compassion. It says, I am here for you. It reminds the body that it is safe. It reminds the mind that it is not alone. Compassion toward yourself is not self-indulgence, it is the foundation of clarity. Without inward compassion, your heart becomes dry, your wisdom becomes rigid, your energy becomes drained. But with inward compassion, everything softens. You protect your energy naturally. You respond to the world with more balance. You transform your mind without resistance. Compassion also teaches healthy boundaries. When you understand suffering, you do not allow yourself to be consumed by the suffering of others. You learn when to offer support and when to step back. You learn when to speak and when to remain silent. You learn when to give and when to rest. A compassionate heart is not a heart that is always available, it is a heart that listens inward to what is needed. When you honor your own limits, your compassion becomes sustainable. You give without depleting yourself. You care without sacrificing your well-being. To illustrate compassionate boundaries, imagine a candle in a dark room. The candle gives light effortlessly. It does not dim itself because another candle is burning nearby. It does not extinguish itself because people walk past. It simply shines. But if the flame is constantly assaulted by wind, it protects itself by sheltering behind glass. The glass does not prevent the candle from shining, it preserves the candle so it may continue offering light. Boundaries are your glass. They do not stop you from loving, they protect you from losing yourself. The more deeply you practice compassion, the more clearly you see your interconnectedness with the world. You begin to recognize that every act of kindness, every moment of patience, every breath taken with awareness ripples outward. Compassion becomes not only a personal practice but a contribution to the collective peace of all beings. Each moment of compassion reduces suffering, not only your own, but the suffering of those around you. Compassion is also a form of intelligence. It helps you understand the emotional landscape of others without absorbing it. It helps you navigate conflict with clarity. It helps you make wise decisions grounded in truth rather than reactivity. It helps you respond to chaos with calm, to hostility with steadiness, to sorrow with presence. Compassion is not fragile, it is resilient. It is the quiet strength that remains when everything else falls away. As this part draws to a close, let compassion rest gently within your awareness. Let it soften the edges of your thoughts, loosen the grip of fear, and open the space of your heart. If these teachings bring clarity and calm to your life, consider subscribing to Daily Dharma Listening so that more people may walk this path of awakening with you. Like and share if it feels sincere. May compassion become your refuge, your strength, your guide. May it lead you gently toward peace, wisdom, and the deep freedom of an open heart. Part 11. The Path of Mindful Presence, walking through each moment as if it were the only one. There is a way of moving through life that opens the heart, quiets the mind, and awakens a deeper understanding of what it means to be truly alive. It is the way of mindful presence, a way of inhabiting each moment fully, without rushing toward the next one or clinging to the last. Buddhist teachings describe presence not as a technique, but as a way of being, a gentle returning to the reality unfolding right before you. This presence is simple, yet it is one of the most difficult things to practice in a world filled with distractions, noise, and endless demands on your attention. And yet, when you learn to walk through life with mindful awareness, everything changes. The chaos around you loses its power. The storms within quiet down. Fear softens. Clarity rises. Even ordinary moments become sacred. To begin understanding this path, imagine the feeling of walking barefoot on cool earth at dawn. The ground is soft beneath your feet. The air carries the faint scent of dew. Every step is slow, deliberate, steady. In this simple act of walking, you are fully present, aware of the contact between your foot and the earth, aware of the texture of the soil, aware of the breath moving in and out of your lungs. Nothing else exists. No worries. No plans. No stories. Just this step. This breath. This moment. When you walk like this, even for a few seconds, you touch the essence of mindful presence. But in ordinary life, the mind rarely stays in the present. It wanders constantly, to the past, where regret lives, to the future, where anxiety grows, to endless thought loops that drain your energy. The wandering mind is not a problem, it is simply a habit. But presence is a practice, the gentle art of guiding your awareness back, again and again, to what is real. Buddhist wisdom teaches that the present moment is the only place suffering can dissolve, because suffering lives in the mind stories, not in direct experience. When you rest in the present, you see clearly. You feel deeply. You respond wisely. You live without fear because you are no longer trapped in imagined futures or painful memories. There is a story of a monk who was asked what he gained from years of meditation. He answered, "Nothing. But let me tell you what I lost: anxiety, anger, insecurity, fear, and the constant need to control." The story reveals a powerful truth. Presence does not give you something new. It removes what obscures your natural state of peace. When you are fully here, you are not anxious because anxiety lives in the future. You are not angry because anger is fueled by remembering the past. You are not insecure because insecurity is born from comparing your present self to imagined ideals. Presence is the return to your original clarity. Mindful presence begins with the breath, the gateway to awareness. The breath is always here. It travels with you through joy and sorrow, through calm and chaos, through clarity and confusion. When you feel lost, bringing your attention to the breath is like returning home. You do not need to breathe differently or perfectly. You simply need to notice. Notice the coolness of the inhale. Notice the warmth of the exhale. Notice the subtle pause in between. In this noticing, the mind begins to settle naturally. Thoughts may still arise, but you are not caught in them. Emotions may still move, but you are not controlled by them. This is how you protect your energy, not by shutting the world out, but by anchoring yourself in awareness. Presence also transforms the way you respond to emotions. When fear arises, presence asks you to feel the fear without judging it. When sadness visits, presence encourages you to cradle the sadness gently. When anger flares, presence invites you to observe the heat in your body, the tightening of your chest, the clenching of your jaw, without fueling the fire. Emotions become waves rather than storms. They move through you instead of consuming you. This is how you stay calm and positive even when life becomes difficult. You do not fight your emotions. You listen to them. You feel them. You let them pass. Mindful presence also deepens your relationships. When you truly listen to another person, with your full presence, without preparing a response or thinking about what to say next, your awareness becomes a mirror in which they feel deeply seen. You no longer listen only to words, you listen to gestures, to silence, to the emotions beneath the surface. This presence softens conflicts, strengthens bonds, and creates understanding where misunderstandings once lived. People feel safe around presence. They feel welcomed. They feel honored. Another aspect of presence lies in the body, the physical sensations that anchor you to the moment. Each touch, movement, and breath is an opportunity to return. Your hands as they wash dishes. Your feet as they walk. Your shoulders as they relax. Your face as it softens. Presence turns ordinary tasks into meditation. The more you practice this, the more you discover something remarkable. Life becomes slower, yet richer. You no longer rush through your days. You no longer feel like life is slipping from your grasp. You begin to savor existence. But presence is not only for peaceful times. It becomes even more essential in moments of difficulty. When your heart is breaking, presence helps you feel the pain without drowning in it. When life becomes uncertain, presence gives you a place to stand. When someone hurts you, presence helps you respond rather than react. When your mind becomes chaotic, presence leads you back to clarity. Presence does not remove challenges, but it reveals the wisdom within every challenge. There is a powerful teaching in Buddhism that says, when walking, walk. When eating, eat. When sitting, sit. It sounds simple, yet most people never experience this level of attention. When walking, they think. When eating, they scroll. When sitting, they worry. But when you give your full presence to what you are doing, you align body and mind. In that alignment, you awaken. You transform your mind. You soften your heart. You return to yourself. Mindful presence also teaches you how to live without fear. Fear arises when the mind imagines what might happen. But in the present moment, you are always safe. Even in moments of pain, the pain is bearable. It is the story about the pain, the fear of its continuation, the belief that it defines you, that creates suffering. Presence cuts through the story. It brings you back to reality, where each moment is manageable, where life unfolds one breath at a time. Presence is not perfection. You will forget again and again. The mind will wander again and again. But each time you notice, each time you return, the mind becomes a bit clearer, the heart a bit softer, your awareness a bit deeper. Presence is built through repetition, through gentle persistence, through the willingness to come home even after drifting far away. Let us consider a practical example. Imagine you are overwhelmed by work or responsibilities. The mind moves rapidly, too much to do, not enough time, fear of failure, fear of judgment. But if you pause and place your attention on the breath, even for a few seconds, a shift occurs. The tension loosens. The mind slows. You see the situation more clearly. You realize you can handle one thing at a time. Without presence, you react from panic. With presence, you respond from wisdom. Or consider a moment when someone speaks to you in anger. If you react immediately, the situation escalates. But if you return to your breath, feel your body, and listen deeply, you may notice that the other person's anger is rooted in their suffering. Presence gives you space to respond with compassion rather than defensiveness. Presence is the foundation of every Buddhist practice. It is the root of mindfulness, the heart of meditation, the doorway to awakening. It does not belong only in temples or quiet retreats. It belongs in the kitchen, in the workplace, in conversations, in moments of joy, in moments of sorrow. It belongs everywhere. As this point gently comes to a close, let presence settle into your awareness like a soft light. Remember that this moment, this breath, this feeling, this awareness, is the only moment you truly have. Everything else is memory or imagination. If this journey continues to guide you toward peace and clarity, consider subscribing to Daily Dharma Listening so more teachings may accompany your days. Like and share if these reflections bring comfort. May mindful presence become the way you walk, the way you breathe, the way you live. Part 12. The unshakable refuge within, finding the inner sanctuary untouched by chaos. Deep within every human being, beneath layers of thought, memory, emotion, identity, and experience, lies a space that is quiet, vast, and unbroken. It is a sanctuary untouched by the chaos of the world, unaltered by success or failure, unchanged by praise or blame. This inner refuge is not something you must create, it already exists. But most people spend their lives searching for safety outside themselves, seeking comfort in possessions, validation in relationships, stability in circumstances, and identity in roles. Buddha taught that true refuge cannot be found in anything external, because everything external is impermanent. Real refuge is discovered only by turning inward, by becoming still enough to hear the ancient silence beneath the noise of the mind. This part invites you to explore that sanctuary, your unshakable refuge, and to understand why returning to it transforms your experience of suffering, fear, and uncertainty. To begin, imagine a lantern hanging in a storm. The winds howl, the rain falls in relentless sheets, and the sky cracks with thunder. Yet inside the lantern, the flame remains steady, protected by the glass that surrounds it. The flame does not extinguish because the storm rages. It continues to glow because it is sheltered from the chaos outside. This flame represents your awareness, the quiet knowing behind every experience. The storm represents your thoughts, emotions, fears, and circumstances. When you identify with the storm, you suffer. When you rest in the flame, you awaken. This is why Buddhist teachings emphasize the importance of returning to inner refuge. Life will always bring storms. You cannot prevent uncertainty, loss, or change. You cannot control the thoughts that arise or the emotions that visit. But you can learn where to rest. You can learn to anchor yourself in the steady flame within, rather than the winds that swirl around it. This is the essence of learning how to stay calm and positive in a world that constantly shifts. There is a story of a monk who meditated in a forest filled with wild animals. One day, a traveler asked him, "Are you not afraid being alone in such a dangerous place?" The monk replied, "The only danger I fear is the mind that does not know itself." This teaching reveals something profound. Peace does not depend on external conditions but on internal understanding. The mind that knows itself, the mind rooted in awareness, is fearless, spacious, and steady. The mind that does not know itself is easily shaken, frightened, or overwhelmed, even in the calmest places. To find inner refuge, you must first understand the nature of awareness. Awareness is not your thoughts, it notices your thoughts. Awareness is not your emotions, it feels emotions without becoming them. Awareness is not your identity, it observes your identity, watching it shift over time. Awareness is like the sky, and your thoughts and emotions are like clouds passing through. Some clouds are dark, others bright. Some move quickly, others linger. But the sky never resists. It remains open, infinite, unbroken. This spaciousness is your refuge, and it is always available, no matter what you are experiencing. When fear arises, awareness says, "Fear is here." When sadness comes, awareness says, "Sadness is here." When anger burns, awareness says, "Anger is here." In this gentle seeing, the emotion loses its power to control you. You stop drowning in the waves and begin watching them from the shore. This shift, subtle yet profound, is the beginning of awakening. It is how you find peace in chaos and learn to live without fear. Inner refuge also teaches you how to protect your energy. When you identify with every thought or emotion, you become exhausted. The mind pulls you into stories that drain your spirit, stories of insecurity, stories of failure, stories of what others think. But when you rest in awareness, you no longer give these stories your full energy. You see them as mental constructions, not truths. You no longer cling to them. You no longer resist them. You simply observe. And in observing, you reclaim your energy. Imagine holding a glass of muddy water. If you keep shaking it, the mud will never settle. But if you set it down gently, the mud sinks, and the water becomes clear. Your mind works the same way. Constant reactivity keeps your inner world muddy. But when you rest in awareness, the mind begins to settle naturally. Clarity emerges. This clarity is not something you force, it is what remains when you stop agitating the mind with resistance, craving, and aversion. Inner refuge also reveals the nature of suffering. Suffering arises when you cling to what is impermanent or resist what is inevitable. But awareness sees everything as it is, temporary, fluid, changing. When you rest in awareness, your suffering becomes lighter. You may still feel pain, but you no longer add unnecessary suffering by believing, this must not be happening, or this will never end, or this defines me. Awareness recognizes that all experiences pass. This understanding is how you transform your mind. Consider a moment when you felt deeply overwhelmed, perhaps by grief, anxiety, or uncertainty. In that moment, the mind may have seemed like a storm, swirling with questions, fears, and doubts. But notice that something within you was aware of the storm. If no awareness existed, you would not have known the experience was overwhelming. Awareness is the untouched witness, the space in which all experiences arise and fade. When you learn to rest in that witness, the storms no longer sweep you away. But how do you find this inner refuge in daily life? The doorway is presence. Each moment offers you the chance to return. When you wash your hands, feel the water. When you breathe, feel the breath. When you sit down, notice your body. When you feel emotions rising, pause and observe. Presence reminds you of your true home, awareness. The more often you return, the stronger your inner refuge becomes. Inner refuge also deepens compassion. When you see your own thoughts and emotions as passing phenomena, you begin to see the suffering of others in the same way. You recognize that when someone speaks harshly, they are caught in their own storm. When someone withdraws, they are navigating their own fears. When someone acts defensively, they are protecting their own wounds. This understanding softens your heart. You respond with kindness rather than judgment, with wisdom rather than reactivity. Returning to inner refuge also allows you to meet life with openness. You stop trying to force outcomes. You stop trying to control every detail. You trust the unfolding of your path. This trust is not blind, it arises from understanding the impermanent, interconnected nature of all things. When you trust this unfolding, fear begins to loosen its grip. You begin to live with a sense of spaciousness. There is another story of a master who said, "A bird flies through the sky but leaves no trace. The sky does not cling." This teaching invites you to move through life as the sky does, open, spacious, unattached. The sky remains untouched no matter how many birds pass through. In the same way, your awareness remains untouched no matter how many thoughts or emotions arise. When you realize this, you discover an inner freedom beyond anything external. Inner refuge does not mean withdrawing from the world. It means engaging with the world from a place of clarity. It means speaking with truth, acting with compassion, listening with presence, and loving with openness. It means walking through life steady and grounded, regardless of what arises. As this part gently draws to a close, let the truth settle in your heart. You already carry a sanctuary within you. It cannot be destroyed. It cannot be shaken. It cannot be taken away. If this journey supports your growth and nourishes your spirit, consider subscribing to Daily Dharma Listening so these teachings may continue to guide you. Like and share if you feel moved. May you return again and again to the unshakable refuge within, and may it bring you peace, clarity, and deep freedom. Part 13. The Mirror of Awareness, Seeing Yourself Honestly Without Judgment or Fear. There is a moment in every seeker's journey when the path begins to bend inward, calling them to look closely at themselves, not through the eyes of the world, not through the lens of memory or fear, but through the quiet clarity of awareness. This moment often arrives unexpectedly, sometimes during suffering, sometimes in stillness, sometimes in the middle of an ordinary day. It is the moment when you realize that the greatest obstacles, the deepest wounds, and the most persistent fears are not external enemies to defeat but inner shadows waiting to be seen. Buddhist teachings describe awareness as a mirror, clear, reflective, incapable of distortion. When you look into this mirror, you begin to see yourself as you truly are, not as you have imagined yourself to be. And in this honest seeing, the seeds of liberation are planted. To begin understanding this mirror of awareness, imagine a pool of water on a still morning. When the surface is undisturbed, the water reflects everything perfectly, the sky, the trees, the mountains. But when the water is agitated, the reflection becomes distorted. The mind works exactly the same way. When the mind is restless, filled with stories, judgments, fears, and desires, your perception of yourself becomes clouded. You believe you are your mistakes, your past, your failures, your insecurities. You believe you are the stories others told you. But these are distortions, ripples on the surface. When the mind becomes still, even for a moment, the reflection becomes clear. In that clarity, you recognize your true nature, spacious, compassionate, aware. Awareness does not judge. It simply sees. It sees your thoughts without labeling them good or bad. It sees your emotions without labeling them weak or strong. It sees your past without labeling it shameful or honorable. Awareness is the silent witness behind every experience, the part of you that has never been wounded, never been broken, never been lost. When you rest in awareness, you learn how to stay calm and positive even in the face of self-doubt. The mirror reflects without distortion, showing you the truth behind your suffering and the truth behind your strength. Many people avoid this mirror because they fear what they may see. They fear confronting their insecurities, their hidden anger, their unhealed wounds, their unmet desires. But Buddhist wisdom teaches that only by seeing clearly can you heal fully. Avoidance strengthens suffering, awareness dissolves it. When you look into the mirror of awareness, you are not being asked to judge yourself, you are being asked to understand yourself. Understanding brings compassion. Compassion brings transformation. There is a story of a monk who approached his teacher saying, "Master, I am filled with faults. I am overwhelmed by anger, fear, and craving. I see no hope for myself." The master smiled gently and replied, "When a room is dark, do you curse the darkness, or do you open the window?" The monk paused. "I open the window," he said. Awareness, the master continued, is that open window. It does not fight with the darkness, it simply allows the light to enter. This teaching reveals a profound truth. You do not need to fight your suffering. You need only to see it with awareness. Awareness illuminates your inner world the way sunlight illuminates a room, effortlessly, naturally, without aggression. When light enters, the dust becomes visible. When awareness enters, your patterns become visible. You begin to notice the subtle ways you cling to praise, the subtle ways you fear criticism, the subtle ways you avoid discomfort, the subtle ways you chase validation. These patterns do not make you flawed, they make you human. Awareness simply reveals them so you can choose differently. Awareness also helps you protect your energy. When you see clearly, you stop pouring your strength into stories the mind invents. You stop feeding insecurities that drain you. You stop listening to fears that limit you. Clarity dissolves unnecessary suffering. In the mirror of awareness, you learn the difference between real pain and imagined pain, between real threats and imagined threats. Most suffering is imagined, built from assumptions, fears, expectations, and memories. Awareness cuts through these illusions like a blade, revealing the present moment as it truly is, manageable, grounded, alive. Consider a moment when someone criticized you. Without awareness, the mind immediately reacts, defensiveness, shame, confusion. But with awareness, you pause. You observe your reaction. You notice the tightening in your chest, the heat in your face, the stories the mind begins to create. In this pause, you gain freedom. You are no longer controlled by the reaction. You can choose your response. This is how awareness helps you live without fear, not by eliminating difficult experiences, but by giving you space to meet them with wisdom. Awareness also teaches you how to see others clearly. When you look at people through the filter of your own fears or desires, you see only projections. But when you look with awareness, you see their humanity. You notice their suffering, their joy, their longing, their confusion. Judgment dissolves. Compassion grows. You no longer react to people based on what you think they are, you respond to who they truly are. This shift transforms relationships deeply. Awareness softens conflict, dissolves misunderstandings, and strengthens connection. But to truly see yourself in the mirror of awareness, you must learn to sit with discomfort. Awareness may reveal painful truths, old wounds, unspoken resentments, hidden jealousy, lingering grief. These truths may feel heavy at first. But remember, awareness does not judge. Awareness holds everything with spaciousness. When discomfort arises, awareness says, "This too is part of the human experience." You do not push it away. You do not cling to it. You simply observe. Slowly, suffering loses its grip. Imagine holding a burning coal. The mind's habit is to hold on tightly, believing the coal is part of you. Awareness says, "Open your hand." The moment you open your hand, the coal falls away. This is how you transform your mind, not by force, but by seeing clearly. There is another story of a student who said, "Master, I want freedom." The master pointed to a vine wrapped tightly around a tree and asked, "Is the vine imprisoned?" The student said, "Yes." The master continued, "Who imprisoned it?" The student replied, "It imprisoned itself." Awareness shows you the vines you have wrapped around your own mind, vines of fear, expectation, guilt, attachment. And in seeing them, you learn how to unwind them gently. Awareness also reveals your deepest potential. When the mind is quiet, when judgment dissolves, when fear loosens, something ancient rises within you: clarity, wisdom, compassion. These qualities do not come from effort, they arise naturally when the noise quiets. In the mirror of awareness, you begin to see your true nature, not broken, not flawed, not unworthy, but spacious, luminous, awake. Buddhist teachings describe this as Buddha nature, the inherent clarity within every being. To deepen this practice in daily life, treat each moment as an opportunity to look into the mirror. When you feel joy, be aware of it. When you feel sadness, be aware of it. When you feel tension, be aware of it. When you feel relief, be aware of it. Awareness does not change the experience, it changes your relationship to it. This shift is transformative. You move from being overwhelmed by life to being aware of life. The mirror of awareness becomes your guide when you feel lost. It reminds you that you are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your past, not your mistakes. You are the awareness that sees them. When you live from this awareness, fear softens. Confusion clears. Suffering loosens. You begin to walk through life with a sense of spaciousness, grounded in the truth of who you are. As this part comes to a gentle close, let awareness settle into you like a soft light. If these teachings support your journey, consider subscribing to Daily Dharma Listening so this wisdom may continue flowing into your life. Like and share if it feels true to your heart. May the mirror of awareness guide you toward clarity, compassion, and freedom. Part 14. The gentle dissolution of the ego, releasing the illusion of I to awaken true freedom. There is a subtle thread woven through the tapestry of all Buddhist teachings, a thread so delicate that it often goes unnoticed, yet so powerful that it holds the key to profound liberation. That thread is the understanding of the ego, the sense of I, the psychological self that clings, fears, judges, compares, desires, resists, and suffers. The ego is not an enemy to be destroyed, nor a flaw to be ashamed of. It is a natural construction of the mind, formed through experience, memory, and conditioning. But the Buddha teaches that suffering arises when we mistake this constructed self for our true nature. When we cling to I, we cling to illusion. When we cling to illusion, we remain trapped in cycles of anxiety, fear, and dissatisfaction. But when we learn to see the ego clearly, gently, without judgment, it begins to dissolve, not violently, but naturally, like fog lifting under sunlight. To begin exploring the dissolution of the ego, imagine a wave rising on the ocean. For a moment, the wave appears separate from the water, unique, identifiable, distinct. But the wave is never truly separate. It is the ocean in motion. The shape may differ, the height may differ, the movement may differ, but the essence is the same. Human beings are like waves, seemingly separate individuals with names, identities, histories, and roles, yet fundamentally expressions of the same awareness that permeates all life. When the wave forgets it is the ocean, it fears its own end. When a person forgets they are awareness, they fear change, loss, criticism, impermanence, uncertainty. The ego fears dissolution because it believes it is the entirety of who you are. But Buddhist wisdom reveals something deeper. Beneath the ego lies the boundless, spacious, interconnected nature of awareness. When you rest in awareness rather than identity, you learn how to stay calm and positive because you no longer rely on external conditions to define your worth. You learn to find peace in chaos because you stop identifying with the chaos. You learn to live without fear because fear loses its foundation. You begin to protect your energy naturally because you no longer give your strength away to illusions. The ego is built through 5 processes known in Buddhism as the aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These aggregates combine to create the illusion of a solid self. But like the elements that form a rainbow, they do not create a permanent entity. They create an appearance, a momentary phenomenon, a pattern. When you look deeply into these aggregates, the sense of I begins to soften. You begin to see clearly. There is a body, but no owner of the body. There are feelings, but no solid self who owns the feelings. There are thoughts, but no thinker separate from the thoughts. There is awareness, but no individual separate from awareness. This insight is not abstract, it is deeply experiential. It arises slowly, gently, as you observe your mind with increasing clarity. Consider a moment when you feel anger. Without awareness, the ego says, I am angry. But with awareness, you observe, anger is arising. This small shift dissolves the self, the emotion fusion. Anger becomes a passing experience, not an identity. Or consider a moment of fear. Without awareness, the ego says, I am afraid. But with clarity, you see, fear is present. This seeing creates space. The fear is no longer me, it is a sensation, a response, a movement of mind. This distance is the beginning of liberation. There is a profound story in Buddhist tradition about a monk who spent years meditating in a cave. One evening, he lit a candle, and the shadows on the walls danced wildly. Suddenly he mistook his own reflection for a frightening figure. Terrified, he swung his staff at the wall. But the shadow remained. Realizing his mistake, he laughed softly. "It was only me," he said, mistaking my own image for something real. The ego is like that shadow, a projection mistaken for reality. When you chase it, fear grows. When you attack it, confusion deepens. But when you see it clearly, it dissolves. Modern life feeds the ego constantly. Social media encourages comparison. Society encourages competition. Advertising encourages desire. Culture encourages identity attachment. The mind becomes filled with stories. I must be better, I must be liked, I must be admired, I must not fail. These stories tighten the ego like armor around the heart. But the armor is heavy. It restricts your breath. It drains your energy. It keeps you from feeling life fully. When you begin to release these stories, a softening begins. The breath deepens. The mind spacious. The heart opens. Ego dissolution is not about having no personality or losing all preferences. It is about releasing the belief that these temporary patterns define you. It is about living lightly, gently, without taking the self too seriously. When the ego is strong, suffering grows. When the ego softens, compassion rises. When the ego dissolves, freedom emerges. One of the most powerful ways to dissolve the ego is through mindfulness. When you observe the mind without identifying with it, the ego loses its grip. Each thought becomes a cloud passing in the sky of awareness. Each emotion becomes a wave rising in the ocean of being. Each desire becomes a flame flickering in the wind of impermanence. You stop clinging. You stop resisting. You simply observe. Another powerful method is compassion. When you see that all beings suffer, all beings long for love, all beings fear loss, all beings experience impermanence, the boundaries between self and other soften. Compassion expands your awareness beyond the small, dissolving ego naturally. Compassion invites you to live without fear because you realize you are connected to all life. Ego also dissolves through the understanding of impermanence. Everything you cling to, your appearance, your reputation, your achievements, your relationships, will change. The ego clings to these things to feel solid, but when you accept impermanence deeply, you realize that identifying with anything temporary is a cause of suffering. When you release identification, you return to the spacious awareness that remains untouched. There is a beautiful teaching that says, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." The ego is small. Awareness is infinite. The ego is fearful. Awareness is fearless. The ego is reactive. Awareness is calm. The ego is rigid. Awareness is fluid. When you let go of ego, you awaken to the deeper truth of who you are. Consider a moment when someone praises you. The ego inflates. It says, "I am worthy because of this praise." But awareness knows, praise is impermanent. It arises and passes. Your worth does not depend on it. Consider a moment when someone criticizes you. The ego contracts. It says, I am unworthy because of this criticism. But awareness knows, criticism is impermanent. It arises and passes. Your worth does not depend on it. This understanding releases you from the emotional roller coaster of seeking approval and fearing rejection. You become steady, grounded, free. Ego dissolution also transforms relationships. When you no longer cling to being right, arguments dissolve. When you no longer cling to being superior, compassion grows. When you no longer cling to being perfect, authenticity blooms. When you no longer cling to possessing others, love becomes spacious and respectful. When the ego dissolves, connection deepens. You see others not as extensions of yourself but as beings with their own paths, their own struggles, their own truths. In practical life, ego dissolution looks like this: speaking honestly without needing validation, listening deeply without preparing your defense, offering kindness without expecting anything in return, acting from presence rather than pride, accepting change without resisting, recognizing that your thoughts are not truth, and returning to awareness whenever the mind becomes entangled. As this part draws to a close, let the insight settle into your heart. The illusion of I is the root of suffering, but it dissolves in the light of awareness. If these teachings guide you toward peace, consider subscribing to Daily Dharma Listening so the journey may continue. Like and share if it feels aligned with your heart. May you release the illusion of self with gentleness, and may the boundless freedom of awareness awaken fully within you. Part 15. The Art of Surrender, allowing life to unfold without force, fear, or resistance. There is a soft, luminous wisdom at the heart of all Buddhist teachings, one that does not shine loudly like triumph or achievement, but glows quietly like a lantern in the mist. It is the wisdom of surrender. Not the surrender of defeat, weakness, or giving up, but the surrender of trust, openness, and acceptance. The surrender that arises when you finally stop forcing life to fit your expectations and instead allow it to unfold in its natural rhythm. This surrender is the doorway to freedom. It is how you learn to stay calm and positive, not by controlling every aspect of your circumstances, but by transforming your relationship to those circumstances. It is how you learn to find peace in chaos, not by eliminating the storm, but by softening your resistance to it. It is how you learn to live without fear, because fear has nothing left to grip when the heart no longer fights what is already here. To understand surrender, imagine holding a small bird in your hands. If you tighten your grip, the bird becomes frightened, struggling to escape. If you hold too loosely, the bird may slip through your fingers. But if you cup your hands gently, not forcing, not clinging, the bird settles naturally. Life is like that bird. When you force it, you suffer. When you cling to it, you suffer. But when you hold it with openness and respect, life reveals its natural harmony. Surrender is the gentle, intentional act of holding life in your open palms instead of gripping it with tension. There is a story of a man who spent years searching for enlightenment, traveling across countries, climbing mountains, visiting temples. He finally reached a great master and said, "I have been seeking awakening for decades. Tell me what I must do next." The master looked deeply into his eyes and replied, "Let go." The man, frustrated, said, "Let go of what?" The master smiled softly, "Let go of the one who seeks." This teaching reveals a profound truth. Much of our suffering comes from the constant striving to become someone, achieve something, control something, or escape something. Surrender is the release of that striving. It is the recognition that peace arises not from becoming, but from being. Surrender is not passivity. It is not giving up your responsibilities or ignoring your problems. It is stepping into life with presence rather than force. It is choosing clarity over panic, wisdom over impulse, acceptance over resistance. When you surrender, you protect your energy because you stop wasting it on battles that cannot be won, not because they are unwinnable, but because they do not need to be fought. Consider a common experience. Something does not go according to plan. The ego reacts immediately: tension, frustration, anxiety, disappointment. The mind begins to resist, saying, "This should not be happening, this is wrong, I must fix this immediately." But surrender invites you to pause, to breathe, to observe, to ask gently, what if this moment is exactly as it needs to be? This question does not solve the problem, but it dissolves resistance. And when resistance dissolves, clarity rises. You begin to see paths forward that panic had hidden. Surrender is deeply connected to impermanence, the understanding that everything changes. When you resist impermanence, you cling. When you cling, you suffer. But when you surrender to the truth that life flows, transforms, expands, and contracts in ways you cannot predict, suffering loosens its hold. Surrender teaches you how to live with open hands, open mind, open heart. There is another story of a monk crossing a river. The current was strong, and he struggled against it, fighting the water with every step. After nearly drowning, he let his body soften, allowing the current to carry him. The river guided him effortlessly to the shore. Later he realized that his suffering came not from the river, but from his resistance to it. The river represents life. It is always moving, always changing, always flowing. When you fight the current, you exhaust yourself. When you surrender to its movement, not carelessly, but consciously, you begin to move with life instead of against it. Surrender also invites you to release the illusion of control. Control is one of the greatest attachments of the human mind. You want to control outcomes, relationships, perceptions, emotions, the future, the past, and even the speed at which you heal. But control is fragile. It breaks easily. It consumes enormous amounts of energy. And no matter how tightly you hold on, life will still unfold according to its nature. Surrender frees you from the burden of trying to bend the universe to your will. It allows you to step into alignment rather than resistance. This does not mean that you stop making choices or taking action. It means you act from presence, not fear. You move from clarity, not desperation. You flow with life instead of struggling against it. When you surrender, your actions become more powerful because they are rooted in awareness rather than ego. Surrender is also the foundation of inner peace. When you stop fighting with your own mind, your inner world becomes spacious. When you stop resisting your emotions, they soften. When you stop trying to escape discomfort, you begin to understand it. Buddhist lessons for anxiety teach that anxiety is not caused by the emotion itself, but by the mind's resistance to that emotion. When you surrender to what you feel, without judgment, without fear, the emotion moves through you naturally, like a wave returning to the sea. Imagine holding your breath underwater. The longer you hold it, the more panic rises. But the moment you allow yourself to surface and breathe, relief floods your body. Surrender is that breath. It is the release that sets you free. It is the moment you stop holding yourself underwater. Surrender also teaches humility. It reminds you that you are part of something larger than your individual identity. It reminds you that life does not belong to you, you belong to life. When you surrender, you align yourself with the deeper rhythm of existence. You begin to trust life not as a chaotic force, but as an unfolding mystery. Trust grows not from having answers, but from resting in awareness. There is a teaching in Buddhism: when you let go, you receive everything. When you surrender your expectations, you receive clarity. When you surrender your resistance, you receive peace. When you surrender your ego, you receive freedom. When you surrender your fear, you receive love. When you surrender your attachments, you receive spaciousness. The hands that cling cannot receive. The hands that open can receive endlessly. Surrender is also an act of profound self-compassion. When you surrender, you stop demanding perfection from yourself. You stop pressuring yourself to carry burdens you were never meant to carry. You stop blaming yourself for not knowing what you could not have known. You begin to treat yourself gently. You begin to allow yourself to heal. You begin to understand your limits not as weaknesses, but as guides. In relationships, surrender means softening your need to be right. It means listening deeply without preparing your defense. It means allowing others to be themselves rather than trying to shape them into who you want them to be. It means letting love flow naturally instead of controlling or clinging. This surrender deepens connection because it removes the ego's grasping. It allows authenticity to rise like a clear spring. Surrender is also essential during suffering. When grief enters, surrender helps you accept your sorrow instead of resisting it. When fear arises, surrender invites you to feel it rather than suppress it. When uncertainty appears, surrender helps you meet it with openness instead of panic. Suffering loses its sharpness when you surrender to it. You stop adding layers of judgment, fear, and narrative. You allow the experience to be simply what it is. One powerful example: imagine facing a future you cannot predict. The mind wants answers, security, guarantees. But surrender invites you to take one breath at a time. One step at a time. One moment at a time. Life becomes more bearable because you stop asking yourself to carry a future that does not yet exist. As this part comes to its gentle close, let the wisdom settle softly in your heart. Surrender is not losing, it is releasing. It is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is not giving up, it is waking up. If these teachings bring clarity and peace to your journey, consider subscribing to Daily Dharma Listening so these reflections can continue supporting you. Like and share if it resonates. May the art of surrender guide you gently toward freedom, spaciousness, and deep inner calm. And yet surrender, in its deepest form, is not a moment but a way of living, a gentle posture of the heart that accompanies you through every unfolding, every uncertainty, every breath. It is the quiet understanding that you are no longer required to hold the universe together with your bare hands. You are no longer required to wrestle with every thought that rises or every fear that whispers. You are no longer required to carry the weight of the past on your shoulders or drag the future behind you like a heavy stone. Surrender is the soft exhale that reminds you that life has always been moving, guiding, shaping, and teaching you. You are simply too tense to feel its rhythm. In this surrender, something extraordinary begins to awaken, an inner stillness that becomes the anchor of your life. You begin to realize that the storms that once felt unbearable were not truly destroying you, they were stripping you of what no longer served you. The disappointments that once wounded you were redirecting you towards something more aligned. The endings that once frightened you were preparing you for beginnings you could not yet imagine. When you soften your grip on life, life places into your hands what is meant for you. When you stop running, life catches up to you with answers. When you stop resisting, clarity reveals itself like a sun rising slowly behind the mountains. Surrender is the quiet trust that every experience, pleasant or painful, is part of your unfolding. It is the recognition that you do not walk alone, that you are supported by the very fabric of existence, even when you cannot see how. And in this trust, you begin to feel something you may not have felt in years: spaciousness. The space to breathe. The space to feel. The space to rest. The space to simply be. With surrender, you also begin to understand time differently. You no longer rush the present because you believe the future will save you. You no longer cling to the past because you believe your identity depends on it. You begin to see that each moment carries its own wisdom, its own timing, its own purpose. You learn that there is a season for pushing and a season for pausing, a season for holding on and a season for releasing, a season for silence and a season for expression. When you surrender to the natural rhythm of life, you no longer feel behind. You no longer feel unworthy. You no longer feel lost. You begin to sense that everything is unfolding exactly as it needs to, even if your mind cannot yet comprehend why. Surrender also reveals the quiet courage within you, the courage to feel fully, to trust deeply, to let go gracefully. This courage does not roar. It does not shout. It does not demand. It is the courage of a tree that bends in the storm yet does not break. The courage of the moon that appears each night, regardless of the darkness that surrounds it. The courage of a heart that has been hurt and still chooses to open again. This is the courage born from surrender, the courage that walks hand in hand with wisdom. With this courage, you begin to meet your own emotions with compassion rather than resistance. You no longer shame yourself for feeling afraid. You no longer run from grief. You no longer suppress your longing. Instead, you hold your emotions gently, as you would hold a small child. You let them move through you like waves, arriving, rising, cresting, and dissolving back into the sea of awareness. This is the surrender that heals. The surrender that transforms. The surrender that frees. And as you deepen into this surrender, you begin to see that control was never the foundation of safety. Awareness is. Presence is. Compassion is. When you surrender your need to control, you gain access to something far more powerful: clarity. And with clarity, your actions become more intentional, your words become more thoughtful, your choices become more aligned. You begin to move through life not from fear, but from presence. Not from panic, but from wisdom. Not from ego, but from truth. There will still be moments of uncertainty. There will still be days when fear returns, when old patterns resurface, when the mind tries to grip again. But surrender is a practice, not a perfection. It is the gentle returning to openness each time you notice yourself tightening. It is the soft reminder to breathe each time you feel overwhelmed. It is the compassionate whisper that says, "You can release now. You are safe now." And as you practice surrender, life itself becomes softer. People feel less threatening. Challenges feel less personal. Emotions feel less overwhelming. You begin to sense the presence of something subtle guiding you, an intelligence woven into the fabric of your existence. You begin to sense that surrender is not the end of effort but the beginning of alignment. Not the end of doing but the beginning of moving with grace. Not the end of self but the unveiling of your deeper nature. If you listen deeply, you may even feel something ancient inside you relaxing, something that has struggled for years, fought for decades, carried burdens for a lifetime. That part of you finally exhales. Finally rests. Finally trusts. This is the gift of surrender, the return to your truest, most natural state of being. And now, gently, this part closes its final breath, carrying with it all the softness, wisdom, and spaciousness that surrender reveals. Surrender is the open hand, the soft heart, the steady breath, the clear mind. It is not a destination but a way of walking through the world. May this surrender follow you into every moment that awaits you, guiding you toward deeper peace, deeper clarity, and the gentle unfolding of your most authentic life.